Yo, what's up, homies? All right, so we're going to be doing dungeon video guides. Basically, I did a lot of dungeons on the beta, a ton of M+, and I wanted to bring you guys some just like some advice, some tips, some tricks, so you guys as well can jump into your dungeons and be successful fairly on in the season. Obviously, strategies aren't like fully fleshed out, but these were pretty meta strategies and kind of things that you should be looking to do or looking to know with the dungeons that come out as they come out in M+. This is going to help you out early season and just kind of learning what's going on, and I hope you guys enjoy. All right, next up, we got probably my favorite dungeon of the expansion, Algethar Academy. I think that this dungeon absolutely rocks, and there's actually a lot to talk about, so let's not delay. I don't think there's anything that we need to talk about at the very beginning of this dungeon. It's a very interesting dungeon, and there's going to be a lot of different pathing decisions, but there was some stuff that you were doing that was pretty meta in this dungeon. Also, first off, immediately right off the bat here, you may have made the mistake in not grabbing these buffs in M0s, but like there are buffs that you get by talking to the Dragonflight leaders here. And so those buffs are associated with like haste, crit, mastery, versatility, and then one has a healing taken increase buff on it. So I would just make sure that you figure out which one that's going to work best for you. I think that bronze is haste, the blue one is mastery. I believe the black Dragonflight are versatility, and then the red Dragonflight or crit, although those may be reversed. I'm not 100% sure on those two. I don't select those very often, so I can't remember exactly, but again, you should go and look at that yourself to see exactly what is what. Now, this section of the dungeon that we're about to go into is the section of the dungeon that I will say requires the most coordination in this key, and it's due to these corrupted mana fiends. So generally, these corrupted mana fiends require kicks on their surge casts, and so you need to make sure that that's getting dealt with. On top of that, this scepter has a cast that you just saw get interrupted by our holy paladin here, and so if the scepter doesn't get interrupted, then you're going to full wipe. There's no way of stopping the full wipe from happening if the scepter doesn't get interrupted, and so that's something that absolutely has to happen. The Mystic Blast is just a mandatory kick, and then all other interrupts are within reason going into either surge from these Ellie's or Mana Void. Both Mana Void and Surge are fine to interrupt, in my opinion. I think that generally I like to let the Mana Void go off and more or less like to let the Surge get the kick if I have to pick one or the other. But that's basically how that's going to look. And so you need to make sure that you have an assigned stop for that scepter. On top of that, if you really want, you can stun the Battle Axe as well. The Battle Axe does like an AoE ground effect, and so if you stun it on the cast, it will not recast the ground effect, and so that's something that you can do to reduce like movement required. Okay, now we got some free mobs. Mobs that don't do a lot except for tank damage. Now the Ravager actually does a decent amount of tank damage. It's not the craziest thing, but overall it's still, this pack is not that hard, but it's not free either. In addition to that, the Ravager has a lot of HP. The only thing that you need to know about the Ravager here is that every so often it targets a player at range with Vicious Ambush, which is the circle here, and then will dash to them. And then, like the chicken from Junkyard, will then whip around and aim at the tank and do like a frontal spray. And it's not like a circling spray, it's just like a frontal at the tank. And so you need to make sure that whenever the Vicious Lunge goes off from the Ravager, you are not stacked on top of the tank because you don't want to be getting hit by it. That pack's pretty easy though. Generally, fairly low difficulty trash to be able to kill. Next, we have some of the hardest trash in the dungeon, and I would recommend maybe pulling this slow if you are not in a coordinated group. Alternatively, I think that doing it the way that we are doing it is important. So the new mob here is the Unruly Textbook. So we have Mana Fiends, which we know cast the Mana Zone and the Surge cast, but the two new mobs here are these Unruly Textbooks, and these Unruly Textbooks, similar to like Court of Stars constructs, they have a cast that if it connects with your player, then you're going to get stunned until it is interrupted, or for 8 seconds, whichever comes first. And so you're able to use stuns, you're able to use, kicks, that kind of thing. But you need to make sure that your CC and your interrupts are assigned to make sure that these textbooks are not getting their monotonous cast off. Otherwise, you're going to be in deep trouble. And the reason that I said doing these 2 packs together is fine is so this pack here in the back has double textbook. And so if you do any pack with 3 textbooks plus double Mana Fiend, you're going to be in deep shit. And that's largely because the Mana Fiends also require kicks, because the surge damage that you're going to be having in conjunction with forced kicks on the textbooks is a bit too much. And so if you're going to merge any packs, I would recommend merging this pack with this pack. Now, if you have for whatever reason, like a Moonkin plus a Vengeance Demon Hunter, you may be able to do all 3 packs at once and burn it down before any casts go off. That absolutely can happen. This trash doesn't have an insane amount of HP relative to player damage normally. And so that's a situation where you absolutely can get that, do that in one singular pull. By all means, be my guest. But I think that for general players, these 2 packs that you see us having merged together here are the ones that you should be looking to do at one time. So now, in addition to that, whenever we're having all of these mana voids going off from these Ellies and the surge casts that are basically forced to go off, you see that we are popping all of our defensives here. I'm using SI and Barkskin because I know that I'm going to get hit with a lot of damage. We used Darkness earlier. We also used Rallying Cry. It's a situation that the damage that we're going to be taking there is incredibly scary because we have the Mana Fiends free casting because the textbooks require kicks. Now we're into a pack with double Mana Fiend, double textbook, which, I mean, this is more or less fine because now this is just a solo pack and we're not worried about 8 mobs here. Some person is just going to be kicking the Mana Fiends full time. 2 people are going to be on the books full time, like that, and you should be fine. Okay. Let's talk about the boss here. So you can either do this boss or Overgrown Ancient first. It doesn't really matter. We'll just talk about this boss because it is a bit easier here. And so this boss is relatively simple, I would say. Basically, it summons orbs every so often. These orbs put a dot onto players that can be dispelled. More often than not, you want this boss tanked not dead center. You're probably going to tank this boss a little bit offset, somewhere around here, and your tank is going to be soaking as many of these orbs as they reasonably can. And your responsibility as a healer or DPS or whatever, as not the tank, is to soak the ones that you think are going to contact the boss. But beyond that, you should be looking to trust your tank that he's going to get these mana bombs. If you're tanking in the middle, though, you're going to have to play a lot more. Your DPS are going to have to do a lot more work in order to soak these mana bombs. Okay. The other thing that goes on is a ability called Mana Bomb. Maybe I shouldn't have used that term. The mana balls. Okay. And there's an ability called Mana Bomb. And this ability here puts a circle onto players. It puts a circle onto 3 players, and they take ticks of damage, and then after 4 seconds, they explode and do a decent amount of damage. These things, you should be looking to make sure that you are either topped going into it, or you're popping it a personal. They can do a significant amount of damage to your player, and you should be a little bit worried whenever you have it if you're not fully topped. On top of that, I didn't explain this very well, but these mana balls, if they contact the boss, they do a little bit of damage to the whole entire party, and they give the boss a little bit more mana. And whenever the boss hits 100 mana, and we'll see this in a second here, whenever the boss does reach 100 mana, he knocks all players back, and then you start spawning puddles underneath your player. So he does passively generate mana over the course of the whole entire fight, but it's a situation where more or less it's not like that dangerous. He actually does a decent amount of upfront damage with that pushback. But assuming that you're dodging, you should be okay. It doesn't overlap with the mana bombs all too difficult. You should make sure that you drop these mana bombs in a spot where you're comfortable with the room getting some of these puddles on. But you also don't want to be stacked with other players. Normally, it doesn't really matter because you're not on this fight long enough to where room clutter really becomes an issue. And that's basically how the fight works. I don't think there's too much more to explain with this encounter. Next, we have more of these Ravagers, more of the Battle Axes, more of the Scepters. These are mobs that we saw earlier. You need to make sure that you get a kick on the Scepter cast. Beyond that, watch out for the Vicious Ambush. So we do see the Mystic Blast getting kicked. You just have to have one person that it's assigned to kick that. These mobs aren't anything new, so we don't really need to see them. These are pad packs. These are packs that you generally do a lot of damage to. Something I will say is that some people are actually skipping this Ravager. And you skip this Ravager by like just walking all the way around here, yeah? And by walking off to the side, like the Ravager has 8.59 million HP, while the rest of the mobs in the pack normally have like somewhere in the range of like 2.5 to 3. Like this battle axe has 4. And so it's a situation where the Ravager, if you want to pull something, it's normally the Foragers, because they have like a half as much HP as this Ravager, and the Ravager pack normally is accompanied with mobs that have a lot more HP than them, so skipping them is something that you're likely to see in a lot of groups, but if you like to play it, I do also respect that. Okay, we got this Tempest dude. The Guardian Sentry is the name of him, and he's got a couple of major mechanics that you need to watch out for. First off, Deadly Winds, and like its name, it is actually really, really obnoxious. And so Deadly Winds is a ground targeted like circle, but it's on a 1.5 second cast. And so for most ground targeted circles, they're not 1.5 second cast. Normally they're like 2.5 to 3 second casts. And you're able as like a range or like a healer to get your cast finished before you have to move. If Deadly Winds spawns a circle underneath you, you should cancel your cast immediately and move, otherwise you will die. Like that is just some advice. The projectile speed on this thing is insta. Like once the cast goes off, it instantly summons it. So you need to make sure that you move immediately. Beyond that, it has Expel Intruders, which the only thing that's notable about Expel Intruders is that it will knock you back if you get hit by it. It will do a significant amount of damage, although it is livable. I've seen some people live it. But you can also line of sight it. So don't feel like you have to completely run out of the circle as a melee. You can tank him up against the pillar. So say you're tanking him up against here, and you don't have any of the tornadoes that are in melee, you can just line like here and be totally fine. Okay, so that's that. Now we got these birds, which the territorial eagles are a lot of pad mobs. There are some big birds in the next pack, the alpha eagles, and they cast I think it's an AoE enrage. I'm not exact. I believe it's an AoE enrage. Is what the flock cast does. On top of that, they have a gust. The important thing to know about the gust is that it will target a random player. But like if you have them, okay. So say you're tanking this pack in the stairs, it is near impossible to see the gust cast, and so you need to make sure that you interrupt call the flock, which I believe is an AoE enrage, and then do not tank these territorial eagles on the stairs. Like if they're tanked here, it's going to be very difficult to see the gust. Some people are likely to die, so just tank them out in the middle. Make sure that they're out in the middle here, and you're gonna have an easy time. Okay, let's get to the second boss here. So after you kill 3 waves of these ads, you summon Crawth, which is the second boss for most groups. There's a lot of I don't think that there's many situations where you would play this not as a second boss. And so Crawth is actually fairly complicated relative to some of the other bosses that we've seen. First off, he stacks up the Sonic Screech debuff. And so you see him, he's going to be casting an interrupting shout style mechanic, Deafening Screech. And whenever the Deafening Screech goes off, we take 30% of our HP and it stacks a buff. Now, what the Deafening Screech does is it makes us take 50% more damage for the next Deafening Screech, yeah? Is what that debuff does. And so there is an easy way of removing these debuffs is playing the ball game where the orbs will spawn off to the side here and you throw them through the hoop. You don't have to aim them, you just use your extra action button. And so that's the way of removing them. And so you want to get up to like 4 to 5 stacks is generally the point where you're going to die. Yeah. You want to get up to like 3 stacks defensive, or you could just do 2 stacks and instantly dunk, that kind of situation. And then you want to be looking to clear. And you want to be looking to clear first off, I believe, with the fire, and then second off, I believe, with the wind. It's not super clear as to which order you should do it. I think that generally people were doing fire first and then wind almost all of beta. But like if you go wind first and then fire, I can see that being reasonable. But the wind is so obnoxious for most players that it is generally seen as preferred to hit the fire. And so we like to dunk the fire at like the 1 minute mark, and that allows us to, first off, we're getting a reset on our debuff, as you see right here. It stuns him on the Deafening Screech cast, and then third, it allows our 1 minute offensive cooldowns to come back up, because whenever he's stunned, not only is he just like, he clears our buff, but he's stunned and taking increased damage. I believe he's taking 50% increased damage. And so you want to be looking to save your offensive cooldowns for this. So you see, even here, I'm saving my offensive CDs. We all start trying to burst this. I've seen groups lust this boss. This boss is kind of a pain in the ass, especially once you get to higher levels. But for the general player base, it's not that bad. You're not really going to need to lust him. But you could lust him on the damage amp there and be looking to burn him and skip some phases. So now we're pre-dunking some of these orbs. You get the new phase whenever you dunk 3 of them. I should have probably said that earlier. At the top of the screen, you can see the goals. And so we pre-dunk 2 almost immediately, and then we sit there and we hold the 3rd until we are ready for that to get dunked, which apparently is immediately. And so, oh God, this is a pain in the ass. So we have Thundering going out. We also have a Sonic Screech cast. And now the tornadoes spawn. If these tornadoes hit you, they're going to one-shot you. They don't really telegraph super well, like where they're standing. But they are not. I thought they were cosmetic the first time I saw them. They're not cosmetic. They will do damage to you. And so this is a situation where you need to be like super careful. Whenever you pick up one of those orbs that's off to the side, though, that you can see like it's got an arrow over its head here. First off, you're not pushed by the wind anymore for 15 seconds. Or 20 seconds, and on top of that, you have a haste buff, and I believe it's like 50. I think it's like 20% haste. So this boss does give you some damage amps in the form of giving you more haste, and he takes more damage. But now we are at a situation where the boss is about to start pushing us here in a couple seconds. We have fire spawning from the fire orb that we dunked, and we have winds, which are it's all incredibly dangerous. Then on top of that, you need to make sure that you're dodging out of the way of Thundering and the overwhelming gust. And so all of this in conjunction with one another is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. So it's just one of those spots where you need to make sure that you are really diligent about this boss. Making sure that you clear Thundering early is something that I would recommend, especially clearing it early on the tank. Okay, next part, we have the Overgrown Ancient section of this dungeon. Which some players like to do this section first. I think that this is totally reasonable to do this section first. I think it's totally reasonable to go the route that we did. This is a dungeon that you can really pick your route and pick something that works for you, where you want to go first. I think that Overgrown Ancient is more often than not the most difficult part of the dungeon. And so if you want to go here first and see if your group is going to fail it, that way you don't spend a lot of time in here, that makes sense, because the timer in here is fairly lenient at 32 minutes. You know, it's not something that is overly difficult, but at the same point, like the boss here is very, very dangerous. So I think that like the isolated difficulty in this Overgrown Ancient is generally seen as like the most difficult part of the dungeon. And so I think that going here first makes sense, but I think that also going here as the 3rd boss, from a time perspective, I think it's a little bit faster to do the route that we did, but I don't think it's like something that's super necessary. Now, the only mobs that are in this area that you really need to know much about are these aggravated skitterflies. You see that they have an enrage. The enrage does not bolster their dash damage. So the skitterflies have one mechanic, and it's like a dash. And whenever they dash you, they do nature damage to your player. And you would think that the enrage on them would increase the amount of damage that they do with the dash. That's not the case. The enrage only increases physical damage done, so things like melee attacks. Beyond that, you need to make sure that you need to be really diligent about pre-defensiving the skitterflies. Whenever you have 3 of them up at once, if they double charge you, they can 2-tap you and 100 to 0 you, especially once you start to get to higher levels. If you get very unlucky and you get 3 on you at once, then you will immediately die. And if you get 3 on you at once and like immediately die, then that can start to spiral out of control, where other players are then going to have higher chances of getting double tapped or hit here. On top of that, these green swirlies, they disorient your tank. So that happens sometimes. These green swirlies come from the lashers. I don't think that there's too much to be said about dodging the green swirlies to not get disoriented, but I did want to just shout that out as something that you need to be worried about. All right, Overgrown Ancient. This is a dance fight. It's actually something that you need to kind of know how it works. Otherwise, you're going to probably struggle because it's difficult to YOLO is something that I will say about the fight. So first off, the first mechanic is called Germination. And you can see that we're fully stacked on the tank. We're all 5 stacked on the blue marker here. And so how this works is the Germinate cast goes off, it summons circles beneath us, and then we're going to move as a unit around the boss to try to summon all of these adds inside of melee here. Yeah. And once we summon all of these adds inside of melee, then we will cleave them down. The first set of these lashers that this boss is going to summon will not come out of the ground, and they're not going to do anything. The second set of lashers that the boss is going to summon from the Germinate will come out of the ground, and they will melee the tank and put like a nature dispel on them. I can't remember what it's called. A poison. They'll put a poison on the tank. And then the third set of the lashers that summon from the Germinate will not have that. And so every single time right before the Germinate cast goes off, we want to stack up and then move as one to make sure that all these lashers are spawned underneath them. And that allows us to do a large amount of burst damage. We're just going to sit here and cleave all of these lashers down. There's not too much going on here. We're still prioritizing the Overgrown Ancient here. And while it may seem like you should be looking to full AoE these lashers, again, they're not coming out of the ground. Like you're not really worried about them. Okay, next we have the branch. Okay. Let me take a step back. Let me pause for a second. So the branch has been summoned, but I want to start even before that. Every so often you get a brittle bark dot, which is a physical damage dot on your player, and it's very, very dangerous. It does a significant amount of damage. At 1 stack, it's mostly manageable. At anything more than 1 stack, it's not very manageable. Now, we just had this branch get summoned, yeah? And so this branch casts a healing touch ability, which will heal the lowest HP mob. You should just interrupt that. That seems fairly straightforward. Now, what's not straightforward about the branch is that whenever it's killed, it does a circle, like a green circle around it, and players that are inside of it will get rid of their brittle bark stacks. Lashers that are inside of it will get healed. Honestly, you don't really care if lashers are inside of it or not. You need the branch to die. What you do care about is making sure that this branch dies not when the Germinate is going off, because it is very difficult to clear your brittle bark stacks whenever you have the Germinate going off, because the circle is going to be cluttered with those brown circles that we saw summoning the lashers. Okay, this is by far the most important and most dangerous part of the fight. And if you take nothing from this video, please God, please God, listen to this. Here's the deal. We're stacked up for the second Germinate. We're going to move around the boss, yes. The branch is at 60% HP, so we're not really worried about getting into melee to get our stacks of the dot cleared. We're not worried about any of that. The boss casts a burst forth cast right at the end of this Germinate while you have brittle bark stacks on you. And so every second Germinate, he casts burst forth. And you see, we all have defensives pressed and we have darked here. And this is because of this burst forth, and it drops us to like 30% HP apiece. And so if you're not completely topped because you have this dot on you, it's a situation where you can die. Our healer did a great job of making sure that we were topped in advance. Plus, we all used personals and still dropped to 30% HP. Now, you need to make sure that you are defensiving this. And now we get the branch killed off. It's during the Germinate, but we have it killed into spot, like we have it killed off to the side here. And so it's killed in a spot where we're able to dodge out of the way of the Germinate and still get a cleanse off, which is totally fine. Like the way that this went down is fine. I think that whenever the branch spawns, I generally like to prioritize killing the branch, especially at lower levels, because it allows you for a lot more control. In addition to that, this set of lashers, again, don't come out of the ground, so they're not putting a poison on your tank. That's something I missed. I got to back this up as well. If you have the ability to take a poison dispel in this dungeon, for whatever reason, you should. This dot that gets applied by the lashers melees on your tank absolutely pwns them. So this is a situation that if you have the ability to take a poison dispel in here, you should, pretty much every single time. Beyond that, the only thing that you need to know is burst forth happens every other Germinate, starting at the second one. And again, just make sure that you're inside the branches circle every single time as well, because this burst forth cast with the brittle bark stacks is just not livable. If you don't get it cleared off, if you have 2 brittle bark stacks or whatever, you're going to die. Okay, that's Overgrown Ancient. That guy's a pain in the ass. Hardest boss. I don't want to say hardest boss of the expansion, but really hard. Okay, so now we have some new mobs, and they do a couple of mechanics. So first off, the Echo Knights do a Whirlwind. It's just a Bladestorm style mechanic. Don't stand in it. And on top of that, the Spectral Invokers do an Astral Bomb mechanic, which at first glance, you may sit here and look at it, and I got it there for a second, so I'll back up for a second. And the Invoker will do a bomb mechanic, and you would think that you probably want to interrupt it, but that's not the case. So this bomb does friendly fire damage to the mobs. And so it's a situation where if you have the bombs on you, you want to make sure that you're not cleaving your friends, except maybe the tank. And then on top of that, you want to drop it on top of the mobs. And it actually does a considerable amount of damage on this pull. It'll end up doing somewhere in the order of like 10 to 15% of your damage on these pulls. And so you want to make sure to allow these bombs to go off. And then on top of that, you want to make sure that they just get dropped on top of this pack. Now, depending on the key level, I would recommend two different things. So on a high level, I would recommend doing it the way we were doing it, where we're like slow pulling this pack, we're making sure that it's a lot more controlled. On a lower level, you're able to go pretty big here, I think. And if you walk and you line every single mob into this room and you line them around the corner and you use all of your offensive CDs here, you should be big chilling. Like you're not going to be in any danger. Now, is it more dangerous than the way that we did it here? Maybe a little bit, but the big advantages is that one, it gets the mob stacked up. Two, it allows you to more easily drop those arcane bombs on top of the mobs and getting free passive cleave. Now, what you see here is we're just like we're gonna do this one pack at a time because we don't really care. We're just trying to make sure that we are a bit safer because we're doing this on an 18. And now we have the final boss, Echo of Doragosa, and we can talk about that. Echo of Doragosa is another dance style fight, but it's only a dance with like 3 mechanics, so you don't have to worry too much about it. So first and foremost, there's a there's a debuff that stacks up on this fight, and it gives you 5% damage per stack. At 4 stacks, the debuff expires, and it puts like a puddle on the ground, yeah, and the puddle shoots arcane missiles out from it, yeah, and it's actually kind of difficult to get to 4 stacks because stacks are only applied via taking, more often than not, avoidable damage. Now, there are some unavoidable things, like you see myself and our healer here. We both get a stack, and it looks like it's this bolstering buff, yeah? So we both get a stack here from the boss doing like a pulse. Like he every so often will do a pulse, and it will put stacks onto 2 players. This is unavoidable. This is the only, I think that's the only way that you, or there's a third way. There are 3 ways, or there are 2 ways that will put unavoidable stacks on you, but most of the ways that you can get a stacks applied are avoidable in some capacity. And it's generally pretty hard to get to 4, but once you have these puddles spawning with the arcane orbs, then we can start to get into deep shit. So you want to make sure that you're as diligent as possible about not getting stacks. Okay, so with that said, the boss has, he does a suck in cast where he brings all players to him. Then he does a power vacuum outside of that every single time, and then beyond that he does an astral breath. After every single power vacuum, he does an astral breath pretty fast after. It's not always as fast as this first one. Like this first one is near instant, but then he does an astral breath, and that's not targeted on a tank specifically. It's targeted on a random player, which can be a tank. And so you need to make sure that you dodge out of the way of that. And then the only other mechanic that's really interactive on this fight is just like energy bomb, yeah. And you can see right here, the energy bomb can either let it time out, or you can dispel it. And like this is a situation where he has 0 stacks, yeah. So he's gonna drop this. He's gonna be fine to just continue to hit the boss with the energy bomb here. If he had 3 stacks and was going to 4, generally good practice is to like tank it off to the side to where you're able to drop the puddle off to the side, because if you have a puddle that's in the middle of the room, it's a lot more difficult to dodge, but if you have a puddle that's off to the side, it's significantly easier. And so now I'm up to 3 stacks here with this energy bomb going on to me, and so I've had 3 sets of unavoidable stacks. And so like the boss is at 50% HP. We don't have any of these missiles coming out. I don't even know if we're going to get any missiles. It kind of depends on RNG as to whether or not I'm going to be looking to get any energy bombs or hit with any of those stacks. But I've already pre-positioned myself towards this wall here because I know that if I do get stacks on myself, that I'm going to be looking to spawn a circle. And now I actually get hit by the unavoidable fucking thing, and it spawns a puddle in the middle of the room, which I think that like in general, that's not great practice, but the boss is at 30% HP. And so now it starts to shoot these arcane orbs out from it that I was talking about earlier. And if you get hit by these, you also gain a stack. And this is how a lot of players gain a lot of stacks. And if you see screenshots of like rooms that are fully covered in those puddles, that's how it happens, is because people just if you summon one of them too early and then you start getting hit by these arcane bombs, it's not going to kill you, but it's going to summon more puddles really quick, and then that will spiral out of control. Okay, overall, that's the final boss of Algethar Academy, and that's going to be the end of this dungeon video. I hope you guys all enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Adios.